In a small, gritty town where crime was as common as the morning sun, 22-year-old Marcus Thompson lived a life full of challenges, but also hope. He wasn't your typical young man. Instead of getting caught up in the chaos around him, Marcus spent his days dreaming of something better. With a sketchbook always tucked under his arm, he poured his heart into creating art that told stories of struggle and resilience. But life wasn't easy for Marcus. His father had left when he was just a child, leaving him to care for his sickly mother, Evelyn, who worked hard her entire life only to be struck down by illness. Marcus juggled 2 jobs, one at a local diner during the day and another stocking shelves at a grocery store late into the night, to make ends meet. Despite the long hours and exhaustion, he never complained. For Marcus, every penny earned was worth it if it meant keeping a roof over their heads and ensuring his mother received the medication she desperately needed. Evelyn often watched her son with pride, marveling at how someone so young could carry such heavy burdens without losing sight of kindness and integrity. One chilly evening, after finishing his shift at the grocery store, Marcus walked home through dimly lit streets. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the occasional bark of a stray dog or the distant hum of traffic. As he approached his apartment building, something unusual caught his attention, a loud argument erupting near the alleyway across the street. Curious but cautious, Marcus slowed his pace and peered into the shadows. 2 men were locked in a heated exchange, their voices sharp and angry. One of them seemed agitated, pacing back and forth, while the other stood firm, his tone escalating with each word. Before Marcus could decide whether to intervene or call for help, the situation turned deadly. In one swift motion, the more aggressive man pulled out a knife and plunged it into the other's chest. Blood spilled onto the pavement as the victim collapsed, gasping for air. Shocked and frozen in place, Marcus watched as the attacker glanced around nervously before sprinting away, disappearing into the darkness. It all happened so fast, too fast for Marcus to process what he had just witnessed. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the approach of police cars, Marcus realized he was standing there alone, staring at the lifeless body on the ground. Panic set in as he tried to figure out what to do next. Should he run? Call for help? Before he could act, flashing red and blue lights illuminated the scene, and officers poured out of their vehicles, guns drawn. Their eyes immediately locked onto Marcus, who still stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. "What are you doing? Here?" one officer barked, his voice harsh and accusatory. Marcus stammered, trying to explain that he'd seen everything from afar, but the words wouldn't come out right. Another officer, Detective Harris, stepped forward with a cold smirk. Known throughout the town for bending the rules to suit his agenda, Harris quickly sized up the situation. Seeing an opportunity to pin the crime on someone else, he ignored Marcus's pleas and began planting seeds of doubt. Within minutes, Marcus found himself handcuffed and shoved into the back of a squad car, accused of a murder he didn't commit. The world spun around Marcus as reality hit him like a ton of bricks. How could this be happening? He hadn't even touched the victim, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal. Back at the station, the interrogation room felt suffocating, its fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Marcus knew he was innocent, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. Little did he know, his arrest was just the beginning of a nightmare, one that would test not only his strength but also the unyielding love of his mother, Evelyn. Detective Harris was no stranger to bending the truth. Over the years, he had built a reputation for being ruthless and cunning, willing to do whatever it took to protect his interests, or those of the powerful people he served. When Marcus was brought into the station that night, Harris saw an easy target. A young man with no connections, no money, and no way to fight back. To Harris, framing Marcus wasn't just convenient, it was necessary. The real killer was someone tied to the very network of criminals Harris worked hard to shield from scrutiny. Letting the truth come out would unravel everything he had spent years building. As the interrogation dragged on, Harris leaned in close, his tone dripping with false concern. "Look, kid," he said, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Things don't look good for you right now. But if you cooperate, If you admit what happened, we can make this easier for you. Marcus shook his head furiously, insisting again and again that he hadn't done anything wrong. He explained how he'd been walking home when he stumbled upon the scene, but Harris dismissed his story with a wave of his hand. "Save it," he snapped. "We've got witnesses who say otherwise." Those so-called witnesses were coerced into lying by Harris himself. One was a homeless man named Joe, who often slept in the alley where the murder occurred. Harris found him huddled under a blanket and offered him cash in exchange for pointing the finger at Marcus. Another witness was a teenager who frequented the area. Harris threatened to arrest him for loitering unless he agreed to testify against Marcus. With these fabricated accounts in place, Harris felt confident that his plan would hold up under scrutiny. The next step was planting evidence. Back at the crime scene, Harris slipped a bloody knife, carefully wiped clean except for a few smudges matching Marcus's fingerprints, into a dumpster near the alley. It was sloppy work, but Harris didn't think anyone would question it. After all, Marcus didn't have the resources to hire expensive lawyers or private investigators. In Harris's mind, the case was already closed. News of Marcus's arrest spread quickly through the town. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some believing the headlines without question, while others quietly doubted the official narrative. At first, Evelyn refused to believe her son could be capable of such violence. She knew Marcus better than anyone. He was gentle, kind, and fiercely protective of those he loved. When she visited him in jail, her heart broke at the sight of him sitting there pale and defeated, his eyes filled with fear. "Mom, I swear I didn't do this," he pleaded, gripping the bars between them. "They're lying about me. Please, you have to believe me." Evelyn nodded firmly, tears streaming down her face. "I know you didn't, Marcus," she whispered. "And we're going to prove it." Her words were calm but carried an unshakable resolve. Though weakened by illness, Evelyn vowed to stand by her son no matter what. She began visiting local residents, asking questions about the night of the murder and gathering information that might help exonerate Marcus. Every door she knocked on, every person she spoke to, brought her closer to uncovering cracks in Harris's carefully constructed lie. But the deeper Evelyn dug, the more dangerous things became. Harris caught wind of her efforts and sent one of his officers to warn her off. "Mrs. Thompson," the officer said coldly during a surprise visit to her home, "it's best if you leave this alone. Your son made a mistake, and fighting it will only make things worse." Evelyn stared at him, her frail body trembling not from fear but from anger. "My son is innocent," she replied evenly, "and I won't stop until everyone knows it." Despite the threats, Evelyn pressed on. She reached out to Carl, an old friend and retired journalist who had once exposed corruption in the city. Together, they pored over police reports, searching for inconsistencies. They noticed strange details. The timeline didn't add up. The witness statements contradicted each other, and the supposed murder weapon seemed suspiciously convenient. Each discovery fueled Evelyn's determination, even as her health continued to decline. What started as a mother's desperate attempt to save her son was turning into something much bigger. Unbeknownst to Harris, Evelyn wasn't just challenging his authority. She was pulling at threads that would unravel the entire web of deceit he had spun. And though Marcus remained locked away, unaware of his mother's tireless efforts, Evelyn held on to hope. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew one thing for certain. She would never give up on her boy. Evelyn Thompson wasn't the type of woman to back down from a fight, especially when it came to protecting her son. Though years of hardship and illness had taken their toll on her body, her spirit remained unbroken. Sitting alone at her kitchen table one evening, she stared at the stack of papers in front of her, police reports, witness statements, and notes she'd scribbled during her conversations with neighbors. Something didn't add up, and Evelyn was determined to find out what. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the documents, but her mind was sharp, piecing together fragments of the puzzle like a seasoned detective. The more she read, the angrier she became. The timeline of events didn't match Marcus's account. Witnesses claimed they saw him arguing with the victim earlier that night, But Evelyn knew this was impossible. Marcus had been working his shift at the grocery store during the alleged argument. She remembered calling him briefly around that time to check if he needed anything from home. He sounded tired but cheerful, telling her about how he planned to finish early so they could watch an old movie together. That phone call became a crucial detail in her investigation. If Marcus was talking to her at the exact moment witnesses claimed he was confronting the victim, then those witnesses were lying. Determined to prove her theory, Evelyn decided to visit the grocery store where Marcus worked. She spoke to his manager, who confirmed Marcus had clocked out at 10:45 p.m., well after the supposed altercation occurred. Armed with this new information, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. But proving Marcus's innocence wasn't just about disproving lies. She needed concrete evidence to expose the truth. That's when she turned to Carl, her old friend and retired journalist. Carl was hesitant at first. "Evelyn," he warned gently, "this isn't some small-town scandal we're dealing with. These are cops, and they don't take kindly to people poking around in their business." Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "I don't care who they are or what they'll do," she said firmly. "My son is sitting in jail for something he didn't do, and I'm not stopping until everyone knows the truth." Her conviction moved Carl, and he agreed to help. Together, they began retracing Marcus's steps the night of the murder. They visited the alleyway where the crime took place, examining every inch of the scene. It was there that Evelyn noticed something odd: a security camera mounted on the side of a nearby convenience store. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, but Evelyn's instincts told her otherwise. She approached the store owner, a kind elderly man named Mr. Patel, and asked if the camera was operational. To her relief, it was. Mr. Patel agreed to let them review the footage, though he admitted it might not be helpful since the camera faced away from the alley. Still, Evelyn refused to give up. Hours later, hunched over a grainy monitor in the back room of the store, she finally found what she was looking for. The timestamp on the video showed Marcus walking past the alley moments after the murder occurred. There was no sign of any confrontation, no struggle, just a young man heading home after a long day of work. Evelyn's heart swelled with relief, but she knew this was only the beginning. With the footage in hand, Evelyn and Carl realized they were onto something big. However, obtaining the evidence came with risks. Word spread quickly that Evelyn was asking too many questions, and soon she started receiving anonymous threats. Late one night, as she sat at her kitchen table reviewing the tape, her phone buzzed with a chilling message: "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Fear crept into her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to let fear stop her, not when Marcus's life depended on her courage. Evelyn confided in Carl about the threats, and he urged her to be careful. "You're playing with fire here," he cautioned. "These people aren't messing around." Evelyn nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, but her resolve never wavered. "If I stop now, they win," she replied. "And I won't let them destroy my family." As days turned into weeks, Evelyn continued her relentless pursuit of justice. She reached out to anyone who might have seen something unusual that night, knocking on doors and making calls. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in the case against Marcus. What started as a mother's desperate plea for help was evolving into a full-blown investigation, one that threatened to expose far more than just the truth about a single murder. Evelyn knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but she also knew she couldn't turn back. For Marcus, she would risk everything. Evelyn's investigation took a dramatic turn when she stumbled upon a name that made her blood run cold: Detective Harris. The more she dug, the clearer it became that Harris wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was at the center of a tangled web of deceit and criminal activity. With Carl's help, Evelyn began piecing together fragments of information about Harris's past. They discovered he had been involved in several high-profile cases where key suspects mysteriously disappeared or were acquitted, despite overwhelming evidence against them. Each case seemed to have one thing in common: Harris. Carl introduced Evelyn to an old contact of his, a retired police officer named Officer Ramirez, who had worked alongside Harris years ago. Ramirez was hesitant to talk at first, fearing retaliation, but Evelyn's sincerity and desperation convinced him to meet with her secretly. Late one evening, under the dim glow of a street lamp in an empty parking lot, Evelyn sat across from Ramirez, clutching a notepad tightly in her hands. Ramirez spoke cautiously, his voice low and steady. "Harris has always played dirty," he admitted. "But what you're dealing with now, this is next-level stuff. He doesn't just cover up crimes, he orchestrates them." According to Ramirez, Harris had ties to local gangs and drug dealers, helping them evade arrest in exchange for money and favors. When someone threatened to expose these connections, Harris would pin unrelated crimes on vulnerable people like Marcus to throw everyone off track. The revelation hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about proving Marcus's innocence anymore. It was about exposing a dangerous man who had abused his power for far too long. But as much as Evelyn wanted to march into the police station and confront Harris herself, she knew better. She needed undeniable proof if she hoped to bring him down without putting herself or Marcus in even greater danger. Ramirez agreed to provide Evelyn with internal documents detailing some of Harris's shady dealings. However, he warned her that going public with this information could put her life at risk. "You're playing with fire here," he said, echoing Carl's earlier warning. Evelyn nodded solemnly, knowing full well what she was up against. Still, she couldn't let fear dictate her actions, not when so much was at stake. Armed with new evidence, Evelyn and Carl devised a plan to leak the documents to multiple news outlets simultaneously. By spreading the information across different platforms, they hoped to ensure it couldn't be silenced or buried. They spent hours strategizing, carefully timing their release to coincide with Marcus's upcoming court hearing. If everything went according to plan, the truth would come out before Harris could manipulate the system any further. As Evelyn prepared for the final stages of her plan, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Shadows seemed darker, footsteps louder, and every knock on her door sent her heart racing. One night, while reviewing the leaked documents, she heard a soft scratching sound outside her window. Her breath caught in her throat as she peeked through the blinds, only to see nothing but the quiet street bathed in moonlight. Though no one was there, the message was clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to let her expose them without a fight. Despite the mounting pressure and constant fear, Evelyn refused to back down. Every threat, every sleepless night only strengthened her resolve. She thought about Marcus sitting alone in his cell, stripped of his freedom because of Harris's lies. She thought about all the other innocent lives destroyed by corruption. And she thought about her own fragile health, how each day brought her closer to the end of her journey. Yet none of it mattered. For Evelyn, this wasn't just about saving her son. It was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. With trembling hands, Evelyn finalized the documents and sent them off to trusted journalists. As she pressed send on her computer, tears welled up in her eyes, not from fear but from hope. Hope that justice would prevail, hope that her son would walk free, and hope that her efforts might spark change in a town drowning in darkness. Little did she know, her actions were about to ignite a firestorm that would rock the entire community, and leave no room for Harris to hide. The morning after Evelyn sent the leaked documents to multiple news outlets, the town woke up to a storm of headlines. Front-page stories screamed about corruption within the police department, naming Detective Harris as the mastermind behind years of cover-ups and fabricated cases. Journalists dissected the internal documents provided by Officer Ramirez, exposing how Harris manipulated evidence, intimidated witnesses, and protected criminals tied to his network. The revelations shocked the community, sparking outrage and disbelief. For Marcus, locked away in his jail cell, the news felt like a distant echo. He had no access to television or newspapers, but whispers among the guards hinted at something big happening outside. When his lawyer arrived for their meeting, her face was flushed with excitement. "Marcus," she said breathlessly, sliding a stack of printed articles across the table. "This is huge. Your mom, she's done it. She's exposed everything." Marcus's hands trembled as he scanned the headlines, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. For the first time since his arrest, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Evelyn watched the chaos unfold from her small living room, clutching a cup of tea to steady her nerves. News vans lined the streets outside the police station, reporters shoving microphones into the faces of bewildered officers. Protesters began gathering in the town square, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "Corruption must end." Social media lit up with hashtags demanding accountability. What started as Evelyn's quiet crusade had exploded into a movement that united the entire town against the rot festering within its institutions. But Harris wasn't going down without a fight. Furious over the leak, he called an emergency press conference, attempting to discredit the accusations. Standing before a sea of cameras, he tried to portray himself as a victim of baseless attacks. "These allegations are nothing more than lies spread by those who want to undermine law enforcement," he declared, his voice dripping with false confidence. However, his performance fell flat. The public had seen too much evidence to be swayed by his empty words. Reporters bombarded him with questions, forcing him to squirm under the spotlight. By the end of the conference, sweat dripped from his brow and his usual bravado had crumbled. Back at home, Evelyn braced herself for what might come next. Leaking the documents had been risky, but keeping them hidden would have meant letting Harris win, and she couldn't live with that. Still, the weight of her decision pressed heavily on her frail body. Her illness flared up, leaving her weaker than ever. Yet she refused to rest. Every knock on the door made her jump. Every phone call sent chills down her spine. But through it all, she remained resolute. If Harris thought he could intimidate her into silence, he was wrong. Carl stayed by Evelyn's side during this tense period, urging her to take care of herself while also helping her navigate the fallout. Together, they fielded calls from journalists, eager to speak with the woman who had sparked such widespread change. Evelyn declined most interviews, preferring to stay out of the limelight, but she agreed to one televised statement. Sitting in her modest living room surrounded by framed sketches Marcus had drawn for her over the years, she addressed the camera with quiet strength. "I am not a hero," she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I'm just a mother who loves her son and believes in justice. No one should have to endure what my family has gone through because of lies and corruption. We deserve better, from our leaders, from our police force, and from each other." Her words resonated, deeply striking a chord with viewers across the country. Within hours, donations poured in to support Marcus's legal defense, and volunteers organized rallies calling for systemic reform. As the pressure mounted, Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation into Harris and his team. Officers once loyal to him began distancing themselves, fearing association with his crimes. Evidence piled up, including witness testimonies corroborating Evelyn's claims and additional leaks from whistleblowers emboldened by her courage. It became clear that Harris's empire of deceit was crumbling faster than anyone expected. Despite the progress, Evelyn knew the battle wasn't over. Harris still wielded influence, and powerful allies might try to protect him. Yet she took solace in knowing she had tipped the scales. The truth was out there now, impossible to ignore or suppress. With renewed determination, she vowed to see the fight through to the end. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone who had suffered under Harris's tyranny. Each step forward brought her closer to justice, even if it came at great personal cost. Tio. Courtroom buzzed with tension on the day of Marcus's trial. Reporters packed the benches, their pens poised and cameras ready to capture every moment. Outside, a sea of protesters held banners high, chanting slogans that echoed through the streets, "Free Marcus," and "No more lies." The case had become more than just a legal battle. It was a symbol of hope for a community desperate for justice. Inside, Evelyn sat in the front row, her frail frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes fixed firmly on her son. Despite her failing health, she refused to miss a single moment of the proceedings. As the prosecution presented its case, cracks began to show almost immediately. Witnesses who had initially testified against Marcus now faltered under cross-examination. One by one, they admitted to being coerced or intimidated into lying. When it was Officer Ramirez's turn to take the stand, the room fell silent. His testimony was damning, revealing Harris's role in fabricating evidence and manipulating the investigation. With each word, Harris's carefully constructed facade crumbled further. The defense team also introduced the surveillance footage Evelyn had uncovered, showing Marcus walking past the alleyway after the murder occurred. The timestamp clearly proved he couldn't have been involved. Harris, visibly sweating, tried to maintain his composure as internal affairs investigators took the stand next. They outlined the mounting evidence against him, including financial records linking him to bribes from local criminals. Each revelation sent ripples through the courtroom, turning what should have been Marcus's trial into an exposé of institutional corruption. By the time closing arguments began, it was clear the tide had turned. The prosecution's case, once built on lies and manipulation, now lay in ruins. Throughout it all, Evelyn remained a pillar of strength. She attended every session, her presence unwavering despite her deteriorating condition. During breaks, supporters approached her, thanking her for standing up to Harris and inspiring others to do the same. "You've given us hope," one woman told her, tears streaming down her face. Evelyn simply smiled, her voice soft but firm. "Hope is powerful," she replied, "but it takes courage to make it real." When the jury finally delivered its verdict, not guilty, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the weight of the words. Then, overcome with emotion, he turned to embrace his mother. Tears streamed down both their faces as they held each other tightly, years of pain and struggle melting away in that single embrace. For the first time in months, Marcus felt free, not just from the charges but from the shadow of doubt that had loomed over him. Outside, the crowd roared with joy, celebrating not only Marcus's exoneration, but also the fall of a corrupt system. Within hours, Harris and several of his colleagues were arrested, charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. News outlets hailed Evelyn as a hero, crediting her relentless pursuit of truth for dismantling Harris's web of deceit. Yet Evelyn wanted no glory for herself. To her, this wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing what was right. In Bilaising, the weeks that followed, the town began to heal. Protesters shifted their focus from outrage to action, advocating for reforms within the police department. Community meetings were held to discuss ways to rebuild trust and accountability. Marcus, inspired by his mother's courage, joined these efforts, using his art to tell stories of resilience and justice. Sketches of Evelyn speaking at rallies, protesters marching peacefully, and families coming together adorned the walls of local galleries, reminding everyone how far they'd come. But even amid the celebrations, Evelyn grew weaker. Her battle with illness had taken its toll, exacerbated by sleepless nights and endless stress. Still, she insisted on attending every reform meeting, offering quiet guidance whenever needed. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she often said. "But if we keep pushing, we can build something better, for Marcus, for our town, and for everyone who deserves fairness." Though her body was frail, her spirit burned brighter than ever. Evelyn knew her time was running short, but she faced it with the same grace and determination that defined her journey. For her, the fight wasn't truly over. It had simply passed into new hands, carried forward by those she had inspired. And as Marcus looked at his mother, watching her smile, softly despite her pain, he realized she had already won, not just in court but in the hearts of everyone she touched. Evelyn's health continued to decline in the weeks following Marcus's exoneration, but she refused to let her illness overshadow the progress they had made. Her days were filled with meetings, interviews, and community gatherings, all aimed at ensuring that Harris's corruption would never be repeated. Though her body was weak, her mind remained sharp, guiding those around her with wisdom and compassion. She often reminded people that justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about creating a system where everyone could feel safe and heard. One crisp autumn morning, Evelyn woke up feeling unusually tired. Her breathing was shallow, and even the simplest tasks left her drained. Marcus noticed immediately and insisted she stay in bed, promising to handle everything for the day. "Mom, you've done enough," he said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Let me take care of you now." Evelyn smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. You're going to keep fighting when I can't anymore." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news spread quickly through the town, leaving an undeniable void in the hearts of those who had come to admire her strength and determination. Neighbors, activists, and even strangers whose lives she had indirectly touched gathered outside her home, lighting candles and sharing stories of how she had inspired them. Marcus stood on the porch, overwhelmed by grief but also gratitude. His mother had given him not only his freedom but also a purpose, to continue the fight for justice. The funeral was held a few days later, drawing hundreds of mourners from across the region. Friends, family, and supporters packed the small church where Evelyn had attended services for years. Carl delivered a heartfelt eulogy, recounting how Evelyn's quiet courage had sparked a movement that changed their town forever. "She wasn't just a mother or a fighter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was a beacon of hope, a reminder that one person can make a difference if they refuse to give up." As Marcus listened to the words spoken about his mother, he felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Evelyn had shown him that true strength lies not in physical power, but in standing firm against injustice, no matter the odds. In her honor, he decided to dedicate his life to helping others who found themselves trapped in similar situations. He partnered with local organizations to provide legal aid to wrongfully accused individuals and began hosting workshops to teach young people about civic engagement and accountability. The reforms spurred by Evelyn's actions gained momentum, leading to sweeping changes within the police department. Policies were rewritten, oversight committees established, and training programs implemented to prevent future abuses of power. A scholarship fund was created in Evelyn's name to support aspiring artists and activists, ensuring her legacy would live on through generations. Every step forward was a testament to her unwavering belief in fairness and integrity. Marcus channeled his emotions into his art, creating pieces that captured both the pain and triumph of their journey. One of his most powerful works depicted Evelyn sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and photographs, her eyes blazing with determination. Titled "The Light That Guides Us," it became a symbol of resilience, displayed prominently in galleries and public spaces across the country. People often stopped to reflect on its meaning, finding solace in the story behind it. Though Evelyn was gone, her presence lingered everywhere. In the laughter of families reunited, in the voices of protesters demanding change, and in the quiet resolve of those who refused to accept injustice. For Marcus, every sunrise brought a new opportunity to honor her memory. He carried her lessons with him always, that courage is contagious, that love conquers fear, and that even the smallest acts of defiance can ignite revolutions. As winter approached, Marcus visited Evelyn's grave, placing fresh flowers beside her headstone. Carved into the stone were two simple lines: "A mother's love knows no bounds, a warrior's spirit lives forever." Standing there, he whispered softly, "Thank you, Mom. I'll keep fighting for you, for me, and for everyone who deserves better." And in that moment, amidst the chill of the season, he felt her warmth surround him, urging him onward. Months passed, and the town began to feel different, lighter, as if a long shadow had finally lifted. The changes sparked by Evelyn's courage were undeniable. New leadership took over the police department, vowing transparency and accountability. Officers who once turned a blind eye to corruption now attended training sessions on ethics and community trust. Even Harris's arrest became a turning point, serving as a stark reminder that no one was above the law. But for Marcus, the transformation went deeper than policies or reforms. It was personal. He threw himself into his advocacy work with a fervor that surprised even him. Every morning, he woke up with purpose, meeting with families whose loved ones had been wrongfully accused. He helped them navigate legal systems, connected them with pro bono lawyers, and shared Evelyn's story to remind them they weren't alone. At night, he worked on his art, pouring his emotions onto canvas after canvas. His sketches became a bridge between pain and hope, telling stories of resilience that resonated with people from all walks of life. One day, while visiting a local high school to speak about civic responsibility, Marcus met a teenager named Jamal. The boy reminded Marcus of himself, young, determined, but weighed down by circumstances beyond his control. Jamal's older brother had recently been arrested for a crime he swore he didn't commit, leaving their family devastated. As Marcus listened to Jamal's story, he saw flashes of his own past, the fear, the frustration, the helplessness. It was then that he realized how much Evelyn's fight had shaped him. She hadn't just saved Marcus, she had taught him how to save others. Inspired by this encounter, Marcus launched a mentorship program aimed at guiding young people through challenges like poverty, discrimination, and systemic injustice. He called it Evelyn's Light, in honor of his mother's enduring legacy. The program quickly gained traction, attracting volunteers eager to make a difference. Together, they organized workshops, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns, ensuring that Evelyn's message of hope would reach corners of the community she never could have imagined. Marcus also began speaking publicly about his journey, sharing not only the hardships, but also the triumphs. On stage, under bright lights, he told audiences about the night he was falsely accused, the despair of sitting in a jail cell, and the unyielding strength of a mother who refused to let her son be crushed by injustice. "She taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear," he often said. "It's choosing to act despite it." His words moved listeners to tears, inspiring many to stand up against wrongdoing in their own lives. As years went by, Marcus's efforts earned national recognition. Articles were written about him, interviews aired on television, and awards celebrated his contributions to social justice. Yet none of it mattered more to him than knowing he was making his mother proud. Late at night, when the world grew quiet, he still visited her grave, talking to her as if she were sitting right beside him. "Look at what we've done, Mom," he'd say softly. "You started something amazing, and I'm going to keep it alive." The scholarship fund created in Evelyn's name flourished, supporting dozens of students pursuing careers in law, journalism, and activism. One recipient, a young woman named Lisa, wrote Marcus a letter thanking him for helping her dream become reality. "Because of your mom," she wrote, "I know I can change the world too." Reading those words filled Marcus with pride, not just for Lisa, but for every person touched by Evelyn's light. Though Evelyn was no longer physically present, her influence continued to ripple outward. Her story became a beacon of hope for communities far beyond her small town. Books were written about her bravery, documentaries filmed about her fight, and murals painted celebrating her spirit. Yet to Marcus, the truest tribute wasn't in accolades or memorials, it was in action. Every time someone stood up for what was right, every time someone refused to back down, Evelyn lived on. On the anniversary of her passing, Marcus stood before a crowd gathered in the town square, where protest had once roared and candles had burned brightly. Holding back tears, he addressed the sea of faces, young and old, united by a shared desire for justice. "My mom was an ordinary woman who did extraordinary things," he said, his voice steady. "She showed us that love is powerful enough to overcome anything, even fear. So today, let's promise to carry her light forward. Let's promise to keep fighting, for ourselves, for each other, and for a better tomorrow." As the crowd erupted in applause, Marcus felt Evelyn's presence stronger than ever. Her legacy wasn't confined to memories or monuments. It lived in the hearts of everyone she had inspired. And as long as there were people willing to fight for